Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, we're going to play around with some alcohol inks. I've chosen some pastel colors and I've got a 6x12 piece of craft plastic. This is my first time really playing with alcohol inks on craft plastic. It works the same as Yupo, which is a synthetic paper, but it's a little bit more budget friendly, shall we say. So I'm using these colors. I'm trying to make some backgrounds on this craft plastic. I'm trying to do a technique with some foiling on top of the alcohol inks. In the end, I change my direction for what I was planning on doing, but sometimes that happens with card making. So I've got all the different colors that I'm using, and I'm using it with some blender solution for this particular one because sometimes when you use blender solution, it makes areas a little bit extra sticky from the resins in the blending solution, and I want that stickiness for this project for the foil to stick to. So I've got my first layer down, and I'm just adding a little bit of extra alcohol ink here and there, just trying to create some lights and dark areas and a little bit more dimension on my background. If you wanted, you could just do a background that has just one layer of alcohol ink on it and be done with it. I like alcohol ink backgrounds when they have a little bit more texture and dimension, some more dark areas. I just think it looks a lot more interesting. And the great thing with alcohol inks is you can just keep playing around with them until you get the look that you want. The one thing to be sure though is not to mix opposite colors of the color wheel too close together. Otherwise you're going to end up with brown. A little bit of brown is good, but we don't want our whole background to be that color. So the thing that I'm using to blow the alcohol inks around is an alcohol ink blower. It's a tool, mine is from Ranger. You could use this. I've done it with an empty squeeze bottle that I've just gotten at the dollar store as well. It doesn't work quite as well with a squeeze bottle, but if you're new to alcohol inks, it's a very inexpensive way just to try it out and see if alcohol inks are your cup of tea. Not everything is everyone's cup of tea, so it's nice to be able to just test it and try it and not invest too much into things. So when I first did my first layer, I kind of did them in rainbow order, and now I'm trying to put some different colors in different areas just to get a little bit more of an interesting background. This piece is 6x12, like I said before, so I will be cutting this down into smaller chunks, but it's much easier to work on a larger area and then cut it down than to do 3 individual backgrounds. And for what I plan on doing, it doesn't necessarily need to be cut ahead of time. This is just easier and nicer to work on, let's just say. So the alcohol inks that I'm using are from Ranger as well. All of my alcohol inks that I have are from Ranger. I'll put the colors that I'm using and all the other supplies that I am using in the description box down below. But I chose some spring-like colors. I wanted to do something a little bit light and pastel-y. And like I said, I plan on doing a foil technique, and I'm going to use some holographic type foil. So I think the colors in the holographic foil will look really nice with some pastel colors in the alcohol ink background. So like I said before, with alcohol inks, you just keep playing with it until you have a background that you like. I like to blow my alcohol inks around. I like to have a little bit of control over it that way, but you can see how I'm putting just dots down. You could actually put the dots down and just leave them, let them go on their own and spread out. And I love with alcohol inks how if you say I have that peach area and I put some Aqua ink around, it pushes the peach out of the way, so I get dots of the aqua color. It's really fascinating watching how they work. So the front there is pretty much dry. The back, the alcohol inks that have stuck behind it are still a little bit wet, so I just tucked that to the side to dry. I ended up waiting a little bit too long for this alcohol ink background to work. It did work, but it worked a little bit different than I was wanting. When you're working with alcohol inks, there's a certain point where it is really nice and tacky in certain areas and the foil will stick to it, and then it gets to a point where it's a little bit too dry. So the foil does stick to it, but not as much as I'm wanting. So I'll show you in a minute how to add other areas to do some foil on. So the foil that I'm using is just Spellbinder's Glimmer foil. It's the same stuff that you use for hot foiling. I'm not doing hot foiling with this. The craft plastic would not tolerate that very well. all I'm doing is putting that foil with the not pretty side against the alcohol ink, and then I'm using the pressure of my die cutting machine, and that is going to fuse that foil to some of the sticky areas of your alcohol ink background. If you want to add more foil, you can use a glue like Tombow Multi and just put little lines of glue or areas of glue where you want that foil to stick. Now I'm just using it right from the tube. You could use it from the tube and then use, say, a brush to spread it out if you want wider areas. I just want some areas that have some foil to it. Now, Tombow Multi, if you use it to glue two pieces of paper together, it's going to glue and they're not going to come apart. If you just put it on something and let it dries like a Post-it note. So that Post-it note like finish is what's going to stick to the foil. So once again, I'm putting my foil not pretty side to the alcohol ink, and I'm running it through my Big Shot machine. I do get a little tiny bit of the texture from my Big Shot plates, but that's okay. It just adds to the interest of this background here. Now, sometimes when you first start to try to take the foil off, it really wants to stick to that background, but it will come off. And you can see here how I got more foil onto that background where that glue was. In the end, I didn't want to use these backgrounds as backgrounds for cards because I thought it would look really good as a background for a card with, say, a large sentiment on it that had a focal point, but I don't have any dies or things like that I wanted to use. So I chose to use this Blossom die cut and die cut all three of these pieces and create a card that way. So I'm going to take my backgrounds here, choose which ones I want for which dies, and I'm going to die cut everything and layer those pieces on top of each other. Because this surface is craft plastic, it is going to take a while for that glue to dry because the plastic doesn't really absorb the glue, so it doesn't really glue or dry from through the plastic, basically. So you will have to wait a while for it to dry. I'm just using some Distress Collage Medium. I know that will work on the plastic, but like I said, I'll have to wait for it to dry. Now, I like to, for this particular blossom, I like to choose two petals that are very unique and pick which petals match the one underneath it through that, if that makes any sense. Sometimes I'll take the packaging out like you see here, just to be able to decipher exactly which part goes where and use that as a guide. Some of these layering dies, these colorized dies, are easier to match the petals than other ones. This one I found it was easy once I figured out a petal that was very unique. So once I have those dry, I'm putting them to the side and I'm taking just some of my scraps of that alcohol ink background and I'm going to cut the leaf pieces. The pieces are not enough to get full leaves out of these, but that's okay. I'm not going to have everything out anyways. Some of it is going to be tucked behind the flower. It'll just give an impression of a leaf, which is what I'm looking for. So I have my sticky mat from my Misty, and I'm taking just some background paper. This one is just from Hammermill, and I'm putting a stencil on top of it. That sticky mat is going to help that stencil stick on top of it without having to use tape to tape it down. So I chose two distress inks that were similar colors to two of the alcohol inks that I had, and I'm just going to use those for my background. I'm just doing a random pattern on that background. I want to have those colors on there. I want the pattern from the stencil, but I don't necessarily want certain colors in certain areas. I chose the blues and greens just so that my flower could pop out a little bit more. Once I have my whole background covered, and I do go back over with different colors or with it back and forth between the blue and the green just to make sure I have a nice blend, I'm going to take some mica spray and I'm going to spritz it on here. Now I am only putting that nozzle about halfway down so that I get some color blobs. This one here is the Pewter, so it's got a bit of a silver tone to it, but I do want some splatters from that spray. I think it just will make the background look a little bit more interesting, and that silver color will tie into the foil that we're using. So I'm going to let that completely dry. Once that is dry, or while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm taking my scissors and I'm cutting down into the petals and the flower. This is going to release them, and that way I can kind of curve them a little bit with my fingers. This works really well when you're using it on paper, not so well when you're using craft plastic. I didn't really want to curl too much. I did get some movement to it. I just wanted that die cut not to be quite as flat. After having that done, I decided I wanted a little bit of that coral color that is in that flower on the background. So I have some Magicals pigment powders here. They have a bit of a shimmer to them, and I'm just flicking it on the background just to tie in the color from the flower. I'm going to let that completely dry, and then I'm going to glue this piece down on my card base, and I'm going to put an acrylic block on it to hold it down. I like to use the acrylic block because it frees my hand up to use or to work on other things while I'm waiting for that to dry. I just lightly placed my die cut there just to make sure I had the placement that I wanted, and then I'm going to glue those die cuts. This shouldn't take nearly as long to dry as it did for the flowers, just because I do have paper underneath there, so the glue can dry through the paper a little bit. I'm going to place my flower down onto the card front, and then I have some sentiments that I have pre-foiled. I always like to foil extra sentiments when I'm doing some foiling, and it's done with the same foil that I have on my alcohol ink backgrounds or the die cut pieces. So that is going to tie in nicely. And I just showed you there the die and foiling set that I used for those sentiments. I'll have them listed in the description as well. I'm going to glue those sentiments right on top of the flower. I wanted them to be in with that center focal point, trying to make sure that they are straight throughout the card. And then I'm going to put that acrylic block back down again, just to make sure that they have good contact with the card. Because I've used my finger to give a little bit of curvature or a little bit of movement to that petal, the petals on the flower, I wanted to make sure that that has some good contact with the flower so that it can dry properly. And there is my finished card. You can see it has a little bit of dimension to it, not a ton, but just enough so that it's not completely flat. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a fabulous day.